Nobody asked for this, but I did it anyway. I 3D printed a part that maybe didn't have a whole lot of people wanting it. Probably wasn't the most popular thing in the world. I actually 3D printed more than this, but I only had one success, which is a bit unfortunate. And the part that I'm referring to, that I'm teasing, is this one right here. This helmet. This is the next helmet design that I made. I also printed a stringer helmet, which unfortunately did not work, and that is why I printed in this black color, although it's also pretty translucent, so it wouldn't have given me the result I wanted anyway, though definitely would have been usable. However, the next helmet actually printed really well. I'm surprised by that too, mostly because the stringer helmet actually had less issues overall. There were no manifold issues or anything like that, so really there wasn't a whole lot to worry about in general. This one, however, had a handful of faces that weren't quite what they needed to be, but I figured I have a little bit of extra room on the plate, I might as well try. And sure enough, it came out. It was interesting too, because I used the lychee slicer program, and when I was slicing the object itself, during rendering, it didn't even show this portion at all. Everything else was shown on the screen as it was being sliced, but this didn't. It was just a blank space. I don't know why that was the case. Obviously it printed. I did put it there. Just a weird graphical glitch, I guess. Still, like I said, this is the piece I fully expected to fail. Yesterday, I also had printed a set of stringer pieces, helmets, arms, legs, etc. The idea was just to be able to throw them on, and I'm glad, honestly, that they failed, because I don't think this is the resin I'm going to end up using. It feels a bit more fragile than what I was using before, which was the high-speed resin. And interestingly, it feels fragile when people were talking about how the high-speed resin is fragile. I haven't had any issues with that, but this is noticeably worse. I don't know. I'm not the person to judge. Now, I'm still getting used to the resin that I'm using currently, but I'm more used to what I was using previously and had no failures on that at all, outside of issues that I may have made, again, talking about those manifold surfaces. In this case here, though, I printed 9 of these Nex helmets. All 9 of them did come out, though, as I mentioned, because they were not 100% manifold, there were a couple areas where they were connected to the build plate where they probably shouldn't have been, but it was fully serviceable. I could very easily break those pieces off and use them, and it didn't leave any damage behind. In fact, it left a little bit of extra resin that I could easily cut off as well. So in theory, I got 9 of these to work with. I ended up breaking one of them because I'm not familiar with handling this resin, of course, when it is cured. And it's, yeah, as I mentioned, a bit more flexible than I expected, a bit more fragile than I expected. The items themselves are a bit thin as well, so I may go back into Blender and kind of mess around with it a little bit more, kind of thicken up the walls as it stands, and also notably on the back side here, obviously a lot of the head is still reeled, so I may pull some of that down as well. Something else I would like to do is just add a little bit of extra material in the front, because you can push on the front and it will sort of dislodge from the head a little bit. It's not enough to come off of the head, and the clutch power on here is actually really good. So I'm very happy with the connection of the anti-stud to the top of an official Lego head, because it's not too tight, it's not too loose, it's Goldilocks, it's just right. Because I didn't get to print, well, I didn't have any successes with, rather, the legs and the arms, I have not been able to test them. I have partial pieces that I may be able to test, testing the clip on one of the hands or the anti-studs on the bottom of one of the feet to see if they work at all. I don't have high hopes, to be honest, since they are partials, but I'm not exactly sure why it failed. For reference, and as I mentioned in the previous video, I am kind of taking things slowly with the printer itself, mostly because A, I am still learning, and also B, because I figure it's better to play it safe than sorry, right? And so I'm trying not to handle things too aggressively. I'm trying not to get it to pull away too fast or anything that could potentially break away the items from the build plate. But interestingly enough, everything failed along, from what I can tell, a single plane. And at somewhat of an angle, which is weird. It is a self-leveling system, so I don't know if that's a fault of mine, if that's a fault of the system, or just generally something I'm not familiar with this resin, but I have gone in, changed all of the presets that I need to be appropriate for this resin, this brand, this product specifically. On top of that, I still find it interesting that it failed either way. And early on, literally 3 layers in, it gave me a warning that there was 0 force detected, meaning that essentially it had pulled away and was very likely stuck to the bottom of the film rather than the build plate itself, or at least that's what the machine thought. That could be a calibration thing, so I figured just ignore it, we'll see what happens. I ignored it, I let it keep running for a handful of minutes, and then I checked to see if anything was being built. I saw that it was, so I was like, okay, we'll just keep going with this. And for the most part, yeah, I think it was built. So again, as I mentioned, pretty likely this stuff tends to stick a bit more to the film at the bottom of the vat. I don't know that. Again, I'm not super familiar with this product in general. And in general, the 3D printing, I'm still learning, right? But yeah, it's still kind of interesting to me. So, for what it's worth, I also mentioned in the last video, if you guys haven't watched it yet, I would definitely encourage you to do so. It's not really about the 3D printing itself, but it touches on it briefly. A setting that was on by default in the printer called exposure compensation. And interestingly, I had looked in the manual on how to turn that off. I had looked online on how to turn that off. And again, you can watch that video where I sort of address it a bit further, but suffice to say, no one really had the answer. They'd rephrase the question, they'd tell you what your end goal should be, which is usually what you're coming there for in the first place, and then not answer the question, but treat it as though that was the answer. It's very weird, very bizarre, but I was able to find it out myself, so I'm kind of thankful at the very least. Hey, sometimes it's just worth exploring, worth playing around. So yeah, I did get that. And for anybody else who has the same printer that I do, that is the Anycubic Photon Mono M5S, if you need to turn off exposure compensation or close it or open it, as it suggests in this brand of resin printer, it's a setting that you apparently have to do while printing. It's not available before printing, at least from what I can tell. So you actually have to start the print, allow it to get those first few layers fully exposed, as you would expect, and then maybe 6 or so layers in, then you have to flip it off. And I think after that point on, it should be defaulted to off, but don't quote me on that. And also, again, as I mentioned, it calls it closed and open, which is really weird, really confusing, but whatever. Maybe that's a translation thing. I honestly don't know. Or maybe that's just what it's called, and I'm just calling it on and off. I really don't know. Very unfamiliar. New territory for me. But at the end of the day, I'm very happy with the end result here. Yeah, there are layer lines that you can see, but you have to be pretty close to it. And it's a fairly small scale object to begin with. I'm very happy with the shaping of it overall, though. All of the details were preserved, so, like, I cannot complain. And if I honestly wanted to, like, I don't know, take away those layer lines, something I even thought about, which has probably been done before, honestly, is using a thinner resin. Obviously, you could use like a self-leveling paint and stuff too, but a thinner resin or something along those lines and put a layer of it on there and then expose that as well so that the resin itself sits inside of those layers and kind of levels off a bit. I don't even think I explained that terribly well, but suffice to say, it's a learning curve. It's an experiment, but it's fun at the same time. And I'm very happy with the end result. So let me go ahead and take Stormer Necks off the screen here. And hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you want to mess around with these files, they are available already over on Discord. I should pin them. I don't believe I have yet, so I'll go ahead and do that so they're easier to find. Just remember, like I said, the next helmet is not 100% perfect and will be receiving, hopefully, an update here soon, just to kind of reshape it a bit. Probably do the same to the Stringer helmet as well, but at the very least, for now, they are printable, they're ready to go, and you can play around with them yourselves. So you can check that out down in the description below. It is free to join that Discord. And you can also check out Instagram and Patreon if you want to help support the channel, what I do here. And yeah, all that's in the description. You can join the conversation in the comments. And of course, make sure to like and subscribe. I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.